then quickly to apologies. I haven't received any apologies, so I don't know if anybody has picked up on anything themselves. No. No apologies received. Can we move then to agenda item number 2, which is the draft minutes? We have a copy of the draft minutes of the meeting held 3rd of March 2015 at page 5. So if members are content with the detail and accuracy of those minutes, agreed? Agreed? Agreed. Then next, agenda item number 3 is Chairperson's business visit to Queen's University Centre for Cell Biology and Cancer Research. Now, this visit is scheduled for this Thursday at 12th of March. This is the 12th of March, this Thursday. Now, it is completely clashing with another actual speaking engagement that I have to go to myself that I've given commitment to 2 or 3 months ago. So I can't go, and Jim tells me that the take-up 4 members just at this stage is nil. So I think we would need to cancel this.
I was hoping to go there, just saying Nathan, but whatever, I've been before, to be honest, with health, right. But you know, we'd go to... Do we want to reschedule for another day then?
Yes. I think it would be important that we do that.
We might have plenty of time after a while.
Gordon, don't be taking me there, Gordon. Right. So we'll reschedule that now. The committee visit to Stuttgart. We have the provisional itinerary there tabled today, the draft itinerary for our visit to Stuttgart. So if anybody has any comments, I intend to note that, and further detail will be coming along to us. Thanks very much. So there's Paul, William and myself going. Okay. Now, tabled today also is a draft invite to the committee stakeholder event for the inquiry to be held on Tuesday the 14th in the Long Gallery. So if members are content to note that, or Jim, do you want to talk to it there just to take us through a wee bit of this? This is from the table papers.
What page, please?
Page 4 of table papers.
Internal, so.
It's just that the when the survey is completed, the survey will provide, I suppose, raw data. It'll say what people consider the priorities to be and what needs to be addressed. But there'll be no underlying reasons behind that. So the purpose of the workshop is to get the underlying reasons why people feel a particular issue is an issue, and then they get their thoughts on what can be done about it. So there's 2 stages to the workshop. The first one is to identify the underlying reasons why particular issues have been identified, and the second then is to look at how those can be addressed. So I would presumably suggest that once the survey results are in, that maybe the top 5 priority areas would be the ones to address during the workshop.
Okay, so happy enough with that course of action anyway.
And most of it will be a workshop then, really discussion groups, break up and then gather their thoughts together and present them and so on. Yeah.
And we can ask Aidan Stannett if he would provide a research report for that. Then.
Good. Agreed then?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Then update, there was a query around the corporation tax paper from the University of, here we go again, Ulster University Economic Policy Unit. I was nearly making that faux pas again. But anyway, the department has advised the paper by the Ulster University Economic Policy Unit providing advice to the department on corporation tax, which was expected to be made available to the committee following Christmas research, is still not finalised and is currently with the Ulster University. So that's programme of work that's ongoing. So we'll have to keep just watching that one to establish when it becomes available. Now, next item is a meeting with the Permanent Secretary. Yesterday I met, as you know, there were a number of late items, and there was a pattern developing of late items, and indeed, well, there was the issue of items being late, but there was an issue in one particular case of just some stuff not being dealt with in as respectful a manner that you would expect by the department. So anyway, that was raised with the Permanent Secretary yesterday when I met him. He did apologise for lateness of papers and promised to take away our concerns and deal with them. And I feel that, knowing the man, that he will do that and get back to us with details on that. We can't afford to have any sort of sloppiness about the place. So where it does arise, by and large, things happen efficiently and do happen efficiently, but if there's a wee pattern emerging in one section or another of they're just not dealing with matters as comprehensively as they should do or as efficiently as they should do, it really has to be drawn to the attention of the Permanent Secretary. So that's, again, work in progress. Would prefer not to be meeting around these issues, but where it has to be done, it'll be done, you know. So, okay. Yes, Phil.
In terms of the reporting air passengers, did you find out why that was with the department for so long before publication? Because they've had it since December.
He had to go. We presented him with the details of the stuff yesterday. He's going to go away and look at those and then get back to us on, Phil, you know. Now, the Assembly research paper, to remind members that we had a research paper entitled Corporation Tax Northern Ireland Bill, excluded building societies and mutuals, including credit unions, which was tabled for members' information at last week's meeting. Just a wee procedural item, but if members are content for the research paper to be forwarded to the Committee of Finance and Personnel for information. Agreed then?
Agreed.
Okay. Also tabled today is an invite to myself to the Irish League of Credit Unions AGM. That's in Killarney, I think it's the 24th and 25th of April. So unfortunately we're slap bang in the middle of election territory, and maybe frowned upon if I was to have sent myself for a couple of days in the middle of that. So
Now you just put a while to go.
so Phil, I'm looking to you, as you may well find yourself in the same category as the rest of us there, unless you're able to go, would you?
I might be more willing to go away. Get away from that hand then.
We're in public session. But anyway, would you
I think I'd say privately, I'd say publicly, but
very good.
I'll go and check and I'll go back to the officer.
Okay, dead on, thanks. Now, the briefing by the Department in relation to the report on air connectivity in Northern Ireland is now scheduled for the 24th of March, and the Federation of Small Business oral briefing on the inquiry has been moved to the 21st of April. Now, just further to that, members will wish to note that NIE is scheduled to brief the committee on the 14th of April, and the Department is scheduled to brief the committee on the European Regional Development Fund on the 12th of May. Now, any further confirmation from the regulator, Jim, on a date, it would be more beneficial if the regulator was there the same day as NIE. We haven't got anything further from the regulator yet.
I don't think there is a date.
I think, Chair, they gave us a date way in the future. April. When we talked about this in February, that was way in the
But
future.
there's some uncertainty about it, wasn't there? It would be very helpful if the regulator can't attend, then certainly somebody from the regulator's office with responsibility for the electricity brief.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. There's plenty of capable people within that office. This is prevarication and bluster. We want them here as soon as possible. This is a massive issue, and it would be great to have them here with NIE at the same time.
No, because you know the way it works. It's he said, she said, or she said, he said, or whatever, and you're running around chasing them. So, our members agreed then that we have, if not the regulator herself, if she's not fit to attend, then we need to have someone with a specialism in electricity issues to attend, because this one tends to go around too much. Are members happy enough with that approach?
Great.
This issue is getting worse day by day.
So, I know.
Is there a problem in getting the regulator here, or what's the story?
I genuinely don't know. It seems to be.
Chair, can I just say that it's taken an awful lot of work and moving around over briefings to get to where we are now, with NIE coming when they were able to come and the regulator able to come when they were able to come. Now, it's also proven very difficult to organise an additional meeting for the committee because there are no slots available except on Thursday afternoons, and of course other members have other committee meetings on Thursday afternoons, so that's creating difficulties. So I do what I can to see if we can get something arranged for the same time as NIE, but if other briefings were to be moved, then that's going to put the inquiry back, and it's probably going to mean that it'll not be finished this side of the summer.
Well, Chair, if I could come in there, it's probably more essential that we get them here quicker rather than have them on the same day. So if that helps, it's probably more essential that they're here quicker, sooner rather than later, than rather having to try and coordinate them on the same day. So if it's a week apart or 2 weeks apart, I'm not too bothered. It's about getting them here as quickly as possible.
Right, but we'll do our best to try and get them in the one day, because with the best will in the world, it is tricky. Where you don't have the two of them in the one room, you know. So if we can manage to get them in the one day, if not, as soon as possible.
Joint presentation.
Okay? Agreed then? Thank you. Now, next item then is the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee agreed its report, Northern Ireland Banking and Recovery, at its meeting yesterday. The report will be published at post 12 midnight on Monday the 16th of March, with embargoed copies being issued this Friday the 13th. So we don't know what time they're going to be issued, but the embargoed. So that should prove an interesting one too, because they did take evidence from ourselves and from the Committee for Finance and Personnel too. So, okay. Next item is an oral briefing from the Institute of Directors in Northern Ireland on our inquiry into economic growth and job creation in a reduced tax environment. And the papers for the item include a briefing paper which has been tabled, a written submission to...
Sorry, the officials aren't there.
They're not here yet, no. Right, okay, we'll move then to, let me see, agenda item number 5, written submissions, committee inquiry into economic growth and job creation, reduced tax environment. What we received from page 35 onwards of members' facts is submissions from the Committee for Employment and Learning, the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development, the Committee for the Environment, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, the Department for Employment and Learning, the Department for Regional Development, the Department for Education, Growth NI, the Institute of Directors NI, and there are also 2 written submissions tabled today from the Campaign for Economic Regeneration of the former Vistian site and the Middle Ulster Council. Also included excuse me, is a presentation which has been forwarded along from PwC to the Quarry Products Association on Northern Ireland on the corporation tax. That's at page 68. The closing date for the receipt of submissions is actually today. So if members have any comments on this, are they content to include the submissions in our evidence for the inquiry?
Great.
Agreed then? Now, we'll move on then to matters raising. Just agenda item number 6, the matters raising. There are 4 items listed on the index, which is at page 104 of members' packs, and the papers for this item are from page 105 onwards. Members choose to click over to that. Right. Now, first item is Fairhead Tidal Generation Commercial Demonstration Project. This is at pages 105 to 109. This corresponds from NIE around this particular issue. So, if members have any comments, are they content to note this?
No.
We've gone into quite a bit of detail. I know you'd know a bit more about this, Paul, than...
Yeah. Whilst I understand what they're saying, there's 2 issues here. The first issue is about the information that we had requested around their substations and their 33 kV distribution system and their 11 kV system, and the outgoings and the outputs. Now they're telling us that it's of a commercial interest, that they can't share that, and this is the whole argument around the inquiries that we had done where they talked about the heat maps. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. I would like NIE to explain to me, or us as a committee, how it is commercial, because they are the only ones, NIE are the only ones who own the grid. Mm-hmm. It is their grid. Now Sony operate it, but it is NIE's grid. So I'm wondering how it could be ever commercially sensitive when they are the only ones that own the grid. So I would ask for, whilst I recognise what they're saying, I want to know why it is commercially sensitive.
Okay.
And also then, they talk about a heat map. Part of our inquiry stated that their heat maps weren't good enough and they didn't update them regularly enough. If we can get the information out of the heat map, then we would have done it. The level of detail I want is on each substation and how and when people can connect into them, depending on the wattage, the capacity is spare. I'm getting letters every day from businesses and from domestic users who want to connect generation systems onto the grid, and they've now been told, every single person gets the same letter, that they cannot connect at this time to the 33 kV system because there's either no room or they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose the demand going to that business or that domestic user because there's already too much in the substation. This is a massive issue which is going to stifle business.
One of the things is, and we've heard them here before, I think at one of their presentations they said that there were 20 substations that required significant investment to bring them up to any sort of workable standard. And if they know what the 20 are, why can't they tell us?
Yes, yeah. And even if it has to be in private or closed session, I'm happy enough for that. But I have a massive feeling, a concern, that our grid is nowhere near fit for purpose for any business at the moment, let alone growth in business. And this is going to be the major issue for us in the future.
Right. Now, in the first instance, what you're seeking is clarity around, one, why is this commercially sensitive?
Yes.
And two is, if they've presented to us in evidence before, and I think the number was 20 substations at that stage. It may have been 20 west of the Ban, I'm not exactly sure because in the context of the renewable sector, to ask them, they've specified that there were 20 or they specified a figure, a number at that stage, why can't they tell us where they are?
Yeah. And I think reading this letter, and I read it over the weekend, what NIE are basically offering is 10 megawatts, which is not nearly enough, I think, for the actual tidal project. So there is an issue there because no matter what renewable energy connects on, they're going to be stumped.
Well, sure. Would you be just want to sort of tie this bit down first of all? I'm sure the committee would be happy enough to treat it as confidential or whatever, if they required that to be done, you know. So, yes, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it's just to clarify on Paul's point about the 10 megawatts. My understanding is the 10 megawatts is a pilot project, and that the developer is content with that. That's what the developer's been pushed for. Now the overall project is 100, but the 10 megawatts is really just to prove the technology works, etc. The connection for the extra 90% is another issue, but my understanding is it's at a different substation, so it's a different issue.
So we're happy enough to approach it from that route first of all, okay?
You know, that presents the problem there in itself, because if a generation project off the shore in Ballycastle has to travel and grid connect into Reshargan, I was led to believe at a stage that it was Kells. Now it's Reshargan. You know, there is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Thanks for that. Next item is Northern Ireland Broadband Improvement Project. Members had requested a point of contact in NIE. Well, that should be, it says here NIE. I think maybe that's BT, whose responsibility for strategic planning of where green boxes are placed. And BT have now provided details of a new point of contact, and members received the necessary details by email.
Yeah, thanks very much for the efforts of the clerk and the staff on this matter. I was able to speak to Michael yesterday and had a good chat with him. So that's exactly what we wanted.
So if members then content with the suggested actions for the remaining 3 items. Great. Okay. Tabled today is also correspondence from both Ian Paisley MP and Jim Shannon MP in relation to the committee's letter to the Northern Ireland Office regarding the impact of corporation tax devolution on credit unions and mutuals. Okay, agreed to note.
Great.
Agenda item number 7 is retention and disposal schedule for employee records for the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment. A briefing note for this is included at page 129, and the retention and disposal schedule for employee records. Members had noted this paper at last week's meeting. However, it has to go through the formalities of the committee me putting the question, so therefore I have to put the question to the committee that the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment has considered the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment retention and disposal schedule and has no objection to the schedule. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Now, agenda item number 8, we may as well deal with it whenever we're here too, is the Assembly Research paper, The Proximity of Petroleum Exploration Wells to Dwelling. And that's at page 140 onwards. And so, unless members have any comments, but I think it would be important that we share this. Phil and I met with the people who had raised this particular issue. It will be important that we share this detail with those people who had raised the boring of these wells as a major concern of theirs, naturally enough. But there's quite a bit of detail and quite a bit of background in this. So is the committee members happy enough that we forward this along to the people, the objectors who had met with us? Agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Then we move into correspondence.
Patrick, I can also suggest that
Sorry, and we'd send that, yes, Jim has just reminded me, to the Committee of the Environment as well for information.
we also added onto the committee website's section on hydraulic fracturing.
Aye.
Is that all right?
Aye. Good, aye. Agreed? Correspondence then, members are content to note there's one item of correspondence at page 150. Okay, agreed. Right. And now, just tabled today is also the latest report from DETI detailing electricity consumption and renewable generation in Northern Ireland. So, unless members have any comments on that one, I'm content to note it.
How will we read that and see what I think next week?
Right. Very good, Paul. Also tabled today is correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel regarding the Northern Ireland Civil Service Voluntary Exit Scheme. I think it's in the public domain now anyway, so unless members have any comments, if they're content to note.
Agreed.
And any other businesses, the IOD, are they there one day?
Date and time next meeting.
Didn't time of next meeting. Well, we could deal with that. It's not next week, it's Tuesday the 24th of March in room 29 at 10 o'clock. Next week? So,
No meeting next week.
no meeting next week, you'll win in the green.
Stuttgart,
I don't think we will.
Are we on there?
Oh, aye, that's right.
We are,
Oh, aye.
This. Time wise.
I would mind it.
Okay, so we're public again, so we'll move to the oral briefing from the Institute of Directors Northern Ireland into the inquiry into economic growth and job creation in a reduced tax environment. And the paper is entitled Briefing Paper, which has been tabled, a written submission to the inquiry from the IODNI, and briefing the committee today is Mrs. Linda Brown, Director of the Institute of Directors, Mr. Mervyn McCall, MNV Limited and past Chairman of IOD Northern Ireland, and Mr. Bill Beers of Beers Engineering Consultancy and a member of IOD Northern Ireland. You're very welcome indeed. Thank you very much for attending today and giving us evidence. So, if we could just invite you to make your opening statement, and then we'll have question and answer session from members on the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And can I just reiterate, I'm the Director of the Institute of Directors. Mervyn McCall's a past Chairman of the IOD. He's extensive experience of business development in export markets, supporting startups and also helping companies to invest both locally and overseas. Bill runs his own consultancy company specialising in energy. And he's a member of our Northern Ireland Committee and Business Environment Committee. I'd like to start by just voicing our concern about the current difficulties around welfare reform, and if this issue derails the progress of the devolution of corporation tax-varying powers, then we believe this would be a very regrettable situation. In our view, the best thing you can do for someone who is forced to depend on welfare is to give them a chance of employment, and while cutting corporation tax is by no means the single solution to creating jobs, it is a major stimulus, and it would be a great shame if this opportunity were missed, because we don't believe it will be quickly offered to us again. And just bringing us to the subject in hand, what else is required in the mix so that we can fully exploit the potential for job creation that a lower corporation tax offers? This was very well covered, we believe, in the Jobs Plan, which you've probably all seen was produced in 2010 by a group of business bodies. The essentials of that were a stable political environment, a labour force with the skills needed by business and the flexibility to retrain people to meet the needs of new investors, both inward and indigenous, infrastructure investment to support growth and investment, access to finance for growing businesses, and delivery of public services to enhance productivity and outcomes. In the main, these still hold true, and in our written submission to you, we've highlighted a number of issues that we think are particularly key today. On infrastructure, particularly the stability of energy supply, on funding, exploiting the potential of EU funding mechanisms, on public services, unleashing the potential of public sector purchasing, and on the political environment in making hard decisions that will ultimately improve the delivery of services to the citizen. So I'd like to start by asking Bill Beers to explain why we believe the stability of energy supply is a crucial factor in supporting investment by local companies and in attracting new companies.
We're seeing from a lot of our members, particularly in rural areas where they're looking for increased grid supply to expand their existing companies. In rural areas, we're particularly stretched in terms of the grid. We believe, from an economic policy point of view, what we're doing with grid infrastructure investment and what we're doing on the whole issue with power generation has a big impact on the economy and on businesses that are currently here. When, hopefully, we get the corporation tax issue, we have to prepare for an influx of inquiries on business. And if we're struggling in rural areas at the moment, it begs the question, where do we put any inward investment that is coming, and are we going to be ready? Energy infrastructure takes time to put in place. It takes perhaps five years if we're talking a power station, and if planning goes with you. So we have the infrastructure issues, and the last time we had major investment in infrastructure, I suppose, was in the 50s and 60s, and with a 50 to 60 year replacement requirement, we're at a point of a cliff edge, we believe, in terms of the grid infrastructure that needs invested upon, and also on the generation side. We know we have issues with the North-South Interconnector, we know which is constraining the operation of the single electricity market and costing us millions of pounds in terms of consumers in Northern Ireland at this point in time. So we in the IOD have big concerns about what the strategic, the medium to long-term plans are in connection with increased generation. The likes of Kilroot as coming off the coal-fired power station in 2020 and what the plans for that are. The interconnection, north-south, the interconnection to Great Britain and so forth. We've also issues with renewable targets. It's great that we're at 20% at the moment or thereabouts. The target to go to 40% has major implications with infrastructure. Above 25%, we have huge issues, particularly with the interconnector. And those issues translate into costs and they translate into constraints. So we at the IOD are very concerned with where we sit with the cost of electricity, but also with these investments, the fixed cost element of the electricity bill is going to be increase greatly. The temporary generating capacity is a disappointment that we've had to do it. It's great that we've got it, the 250 megawatt of temporary power, but what the disappointment is the that shows that the medium to long-term strategy is in difficulty.
Okay.
So, I think it's really, whilst we are talking about the impact on the economic policy and where you can put inward investment, nowhere in Northern Ireland is a 100 megawatt data centre able to be located. They've just announced in Southern Ireland another one. They already have Microsoft and Google. They've just announced another one to the west of the province in Athenry. great piece of infrastructure. I know the argument is it's not many jobs, but they're high-quality jobs. But the more important argument is that type of steady-state draw from the electricity grid gives you a huge advantage in terms of paying for the infrastructure. So, whilst we have nowhere we can do 100 megawatt, perhaps 30 megawatt, which would be a small to medium size, I don't know where we could even put a 30 megawatt in the province. I think that's probably the summary is jobs in rural areas, economy, and the impact that an influx, an increase in electricity generation will demand, and how long will it be for us to deliver that increase, and what delay in providing jobs.
Yeah, I suppose the things that I see that need to go along with the devolution of corporation tax are regulatory things and government services that will make it easier for business. Now, it's not all about foreign direct investment, but foreign direct investment is going to be a very important part of it, especially attracting profit centres, whereas in the past with our grant system has been more about cost centres. And part of that's going to be to streamline it, to make it easy for business to get here. The lower corporation tax will act as the attractor, but then once we have them attracted, we'll have to make sure everything else is in place. And that will involve things outside this department, but I think as the Department of Economy is the one I would be looking at to see as a point of contact. So people need one point of contact. So if they have a planning issue, they need somewhere they can go to help resolve, and I know that's going to the super councils, but still need the central influence to make sure that things can be fast-tracked if they need to be, that the economy gets the benefit of the economy gets the right status in that. There's money that's available from the European Investment Bank. Again, that would be targeted more to the local councils and executive, because they can't lend the money to the executive, but they need the executive to set the framework of where that money can go and what sort of should come from that. So I think there's more than just a very narrow line of the department that we need to start. The department needs to start thinking bigger to make sure we're going to pull all these services together in a much more joined up fashion we maybe have had. There's the whole employment and further education and higher education that needs to be better targeted to business, needs to be better targeted to the businesses that we're going to attract. And again, that's another area that back to this one point for everything. What does business need? Not corporation tax that gives them a factor, but what else is it that makes things work? One example I've had from the Republic is in the frost of the really bad weather we had a few years ago. Government had somebody particularly targeted making sure that the roads be salted to all the key manufacturing businesses, and they would be able to get their exports out. So it's that sort of hands-on. Like, business is important. It's where the jobs are going to be. You know, we're talking about 40,000 jobs, which will transform everything. So we have to just make sure we get behind that the right way. Get those jobs.
Thank you. If I could maybe just start myself with a number of questions here from members, but looking through your submission last night, and you've touched on one of them, but you refer to exploiting EU funding mechanisms, new and innovative ways of leveraging private sector investment is needed if we're to increase any infrastructure investment in a required timescale. NI departments must become more EU savvy, capable of exploiting new initiatives that are designed to help secure growth in the economies of member states. And you go on to make reference to that. But what I'm looking at is the practicalities of what are they not doing at the moment that they should be doing, government departments, or maybe more to the point, how are they not doing things at the moment in the way they should be doing to avail of these, and what private sector investment are you specifically thinking of availing of?
The our specialist in EU funding wasn't able to come this morning.
All right.
But he is very closely linked up with European bodies,
yes.
and he is very much aware that there are potential funds that just aren't being accessed there, and I would recommend you. It's Michael Smith, and you probably have come across Michael, is the economist. He is the person who would be, I think the committee should actually meet and discuss with in more detail.
Yes, that would be very helpful, but maybe in the meantime, as part of your submission, if he could provide something written to us, maybe as a bit of signposting or whatever it is. You mentioned there specific funds or specific areas that we should be concentrating on, because we've already heard, and I heard it at another event yesterday, about access to finance being crucial, and you make reference to the construction sector, just put one example in your submission here. Now, we have some issues being dealt with later on, I hope around procurement if Martin come, but I'll maybe deal with that if he doesn't come. You also make an investment plan for Europe, and I think we haven't covered that. I don't think any members covering that. Right. The investment plan for Europe, you make reference to it in your submission here. Specifically, again, how should we be going about tapping into that?
I'm sorry, again,
Again,
Michael
it
Smith is
says brief. Okay, no, that's okay.
I apologise
That's grand,
that I haven't come with the
that's okay.
information on that one.
That's grand. And again, the civil servants issue, I had a question here. You mentioned civil servants should be working cross-departmentally to bring a list of viable projects, and that he'll cover that as well, could he?
Yes, there is an extensive list of projects that have been submitted from countries across Europe. I mean, thousands of them, and I think there's a lack of...
If he could give us some of that, please, that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Then one issue that comes up time and time and time again, virtually every event that I attend where we have business being discussed and business expansion being discussed, FDI being discussed around the edges, but it's usually local indigenous businesses here that are talking about this, both in terms of craftsmen that are required and whatever, is the skills deficit. And now, have you particularly suggestions around that or issues that you've identified? We can all identify the problem, but it's the solutions around that. Now, I've encountered this not just among manufacturing, but in skills tradespeople. Because it appears, particularly in construction, some of the construction firms are doing exceedingly well, but it's not through work generated here. They're way to Scotland, they're way to Australia. Some of them are now just one of my local firms, probably a member of yours, McLear and Rush. I've just got a big contract for 10 million in Dublin there. Talking to a couple of contract firms last week. One of them is indeed talking about Canada as an operation move for them, such as the scale of skills requirement in Canada for a lot of projects. Another one, London, they're very active in. So the big concern is that those firms are moving out there. They're taking with them all their skilled tradespeople, some of whom inevitably will put their roots down there in those countries and stay. And therefore, whenever we come out of, hopefully, the recessionary times and into good times, we could be left with a skills void. What are your opinions and thoughts on that, just?
It's a bit of a catch-22 because
Yes.
the companies that have continued to survive and do well have had to go outside,
Yes.
and you would encourage people to go outside, but more for selling their products. When you're selling your workforce outside, it's not such of a benefit to us. Well, hopefully in the long term those people will be able to be employed here, but it's if we have the investment in things like the energy infrastructure, the roads projects that are still to be developed, then there's options for people here to develop those skills. But we need, I think the apprenticeships are vital. And
Yes.
even the higher apprenticeships, which we very much welcomed, and we welcome the proposal that Employment and Learning and DETI will come together, so that there would be much more joined-up thinking on those, although they've worked very well together. Mervyn, you've got experience in the construction sector yourself. If you
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite as concerning a problem as maybe you think, because I mean, I was involved with IVAN for 30-odd years, and almost all our work was around the world. So we would have been the pioneers in taking people from here and exposing them to different markets in the world. And there are some happily married, settled Northern Ireland people all around the world as a result. I accept that, right? But there are also lots who come back with new skills and better skills and more experience and knowledge and everything and settled here and then. So you do get a certain amount come back, and the ones come back are more skilled. But I think the underlying problem is, rather than worrying too much about those skills going out, because what they're doing is they're helping Northern Ireland companies to export around the world, it's really making sure that we're bringing through enough the new skills for new graduates and new skills. And I do think we need to make sure that we're prioritising it into the right sectors and giving STEM subjects and things priority, because that's the sort of area where almost all this new investment is going to require, whether it's IT or construction, it's still the STEM subjects are the core of the skill base for that.
Okay.
Could I maybe add one thing on that particular issue, just as a practical example? An SME at this moment in time in Northern Ireland SME with 2 sites in Northern Ireland is thinking of closing one and going to concentrate on another to grow because of the support he's getting from the further education establishment in that area. Is so practical and positive, both in terms of R&D development and in terms of the apprentice scheme. So I would say the importance of getting the right courses within the further education colleges is vital. But that will give us the success we need both for our own SMEs and for FDIs. But they're considering to expand now, and it's about the apprenticeships and the support and R&D support he's getting from those further education colleges.
Okay, thank you. And just by way of clarity, Mr. McCall, my concerns around the skills, those are concerns that have been reflected to me from within the industry.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm chair of the all-party group in construction, where you hear it from really the professional industries there, and it's their concern. So
I'm not playing it down, but you know there are advantages too, and
yes,
it tends to be the people in the construction industry that don't go outside Northern Ireland and worry about it more, actually, because they see it as taking some of their skill base away.
Right, okay.
But you know, they don't necessarily appreciate when some of those skills come back better skilled. So.
Better enhanced. Okay, thank you. Mr. Frew, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. And just on that issue of skill base, because I'm an electrician by trade, foreman electrician for 10 years, and I worked alongside my van on many construction projects. Even at the best of times for the construction industry in Northern Ireland, it was dependent on a boom in Dublin and also a choice of work in mainland UK and further afield. And I think in some cases I would suspect that the work in England sometimes subsidised the work even in Northern Ireland at the best of times. And there's also this thing about skill sets, and I always say as a Spark, you wanted to see young apprentices coming through, but not too many. Because you don't want, it's a fine balancing act, and you don't want to flood the market with sparks, because that affects wage. What's your thoughts on the present skill set, the availability of apprenticeship courses, the people going towards them, and then how will that affect ultimately wages?
I think we have to bring in the whole of Europe into that discussion, because I think that has made a big change now, and I think that's one of the reasons that wages in construction haven't gone up as much as maybe they would, because it's not only competing with Indigenous people now, it's competing with the rest of Europe basically in skill base. So I think the wages are going to be restricted to what is the European wage and what can you employ other people. So I think it's a more complex thing than it used to be, quite honestly. Having said that, no, I don't think there's any reason not to be doing everything we can to bring in more apprentices, right? I don't think it's ever been a problem where we've had too many people and not enough jobs. It's always been the other way around, getting the skills. But I do think that there's a balance now. I mean, 20 years ago I advised all my family and friends to get their sons an apprenticeship will be Stanley University because you won't be able to buy a plumber in 20 years' time, right? Well, the whole Eastern Europe thing changed all that. There is a limit of it now. So. But I still think it's, and what happens, it does balance. You can see even now what's happened in the construction industry. I mean, 5, 6, 7 years ago, in a construction site in London, you wouldn't have heard English language spoken almost. If you go into one now, you do hear it, because as the market slows down and there's not the same demand, the foreigners go away again. So it does average itself out. But the more we put in and the more we encourage employers to take on more apprentices, I think has to be good.
I think just my experience working with a lot of SMEs around Northern Ireland, I would concur with Mervyn. It's not that we have too many. We do at the moment, and too few good, skilled apprenticeships, and that's the difficulty. Is getting that line correct for expansion and so forth. I mean, I have to confess, I'm a graduate. Yeah, and I think we need to get people confessing that they're apprentices and raising the parity of esteem, because that's the issue. I have a young son who's just made his choices for GCSE, and I am very open-minded. Should he do an apprenticeship or should he do? I am very open-minded in that, because I see that the jobs and the SMEs that I'm dealing with, they have difficulty getting good apprenticeships who want to stay the course in the right subjects. And whether that's steel welding or whether that's electrician, joiner.
It is always the case though, but demand will dictate wages to that degree. And if a tradesman is prepared to move, companies, that will help increase wages, which is key to all of this, because there is no point being an electrician or a plumber if you are on low wages. So that is basically, it's the balance of trying to keep wages up, and that will all be about demand, because when Dublin boomed, it sucked a lot of work down there, which meant there was more for us up here and less of us to do it, which increased wages. And if you were bold enough to negotiate with your company or move, or be prepared to move, you raised wages even further. But there is that balance still to be struck. If I change tack now and talk about one of your main planks and concerns, and that's energy. You'll know the work this committee has done over the last year on the 3 reports we've done on energy, and one of them, of course, was on energy prices. You state in your report that we're 3 times more expensive than in North America. We also know by the work we've done that for industry and large commercial, we're second only to Italy in Europe for energy prices. What impact do your members see on energy prices at the present time?
Energy prices are a big concern of businesses. If it's down at 5% of turnover or something, it's still a big concern. And if you're in manufacturing which is energy intensive, it becomes even more difficult. We are in a world where we're obviously compared with North America. We have dealt with several, in the last year we've dealt with several North American owned businesses operating in Northern Ireland, and energy infrastructure is a huge concern for them, both in terms of price, yes, but also being able to expand in the areas that they are, and the length of time it gets them to understand how much it's going to cost to get an increased grid connection, but also the cost of that grid connection. And we've said in our submission that more and more businesses are moving. I mean, we all know the Bombardier and their plan to come off grid, which because of, I suppose, the comparison with North American prices. The bigger concern is that for some of the businesses I personally have worked with in the last year, installing a generator is cheaper for them, because to go on grid has a 15-year payback in the rural area that they are in, such as the cost of the grid. And I think that strikes at economic policy, it strikes at what we want to do with rural jobs, quality rural jobs. And that is the concern. So when we look at things like our renewable target of 40%, you know, I am all for, and I'm an environmental consultancy, I drive an electric car, you know, it's not that it wouldn't be great to have. The question is it affordable when we have all this other investment to do, because renewables are great, but you still have to have the fossil base, the gas-fired or whatever, as support. And what is our policy in terms of generating in Northern Ireland? Have we given up on that? Are we just going into connection? It's unclear, but you see ahead of us the investment in the current grid infrastructure. You see the investment required for renewables at 25%, never mind 40%. And then you look at the investment that we must do in our 33 and 11,000 kV grid. You know, that is a big concern as to where that will put the fixed element of our costs.
I'll come back to that in a wee minute, but would you then, as an organisation, support a review, which is currently being undertaken, to reduce that percentage target for renewable energy, 40%?
From the information that we have, it would be sensible, it's absolutely sensible, given all the investments that we have to do now, to review it. Because renewables on their own, it's not just about the renewables, it's about, we're pushing the boundaries in Northern Ireland in terms of our mix worldwide, really, on renewables. So it's about affordability as well. It's great to have a target, but you can't have a target without knowing its impact on the economy, knowing its impact on fuel poverty, and knowing what it's going to cost you in overall terms, because the more renewables, the more stress on our existing grid infrastructure.
To give you a couple of examples, I have a business in Ballymena who have planning permission for a turbine, who have now been given a letter last week by NIE to say that they cannot get connected into the 33 kV grid because NIE cannot afford to lose that demand. I've also got a farmer up in Shalnavogie, away up in Glenmurray, who has also got planning permission for a wind turbine, who cannot connect into the grid because the grid isn't capable at that point in taking it. This seems to be a running trend over the last number of weeks, where NIE basically have, because of the price argument last year, they're basically throwing their head up and saying the grid cannot take any more. Now, is that just in my area where I'm receiving these issues, or is this province-wide?
This is I believe, I'm not here to defend NIE or any one company. The grid is stretched. The grid was built in the 50s and 60s to be fuelled by 3 power stations, 2 power stations at that time, and 3 big power stations. What we have done is flipped it to micro-generation without necessarily considering the impact, once we get to 20–25%, on the stability of the grid, the integrity of the grid later on. And it's vital that we do a review here and now. It's great that we're at 20%, or 19.5% or whatever, for up to March of last year. That's terrific. There's now a pause. We now understand the implications of going further. We need to pause and reflect and see where we should go, and what it's going to cost.
To answer your question, this is a province-wide problem, I can tell you. Tyrone, everywhere, it's the same issue. And where if you're putting a turbine up now, it's not about going, normally you'll go to where you have the most, that's where you get a connection, because the connections are so few. So it's a real restriction.
Would you support, obviously there's a difference between domestic places and industrial, would you support redesigning of the tariff?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. And
we all get charged for the kilowatt hour, but
yes, yeah.
For industry, they have capacity charges, they have network costs and generation costs, supply costs. The Republic of Ireland and Germany and other states have reconfigured that. Would that be something?
Can I maybe give you one?
Just conscious we could be veering slightly off into other terrain here. It's, if we could maybe...
Let me,
yes.
I think, come back to the question on energy prices, what our members think about
yes.
energy prices. They all think it's too high. However, I think if you're a local company competing locally, that's okay, because we've all paid the same electricity prices. One shop's paying the same as the next. However, if we want to expand our economy and encourage exporters
yes.
and encourage FDI, then it does really become an imperative.
Right.
Roadblock getting investment. So it is really an issue that needs tackled and dealt with.
Okay.
And my last point, sorry, is on lowering the goal from 40%. Yes, I think it should be lowered because it's going to be economically unsustainable.
Okay, Jim. I'll leave it there if you wish.
Yeah, that's grand, Paul, thank you. Stephen. Mr Humphrey, William.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. On your point about Mike Smith, he gave evidence to the OFMD FM a couple of years ago. I think it would be useful, Chair, if we at some stage had, because I would be interested in his view sufficiently, and some of you have touched on it, as to whether government departments here are sufficiently joined up in terms of the issue of Europe, in particular in terms of European funding, where we simply play at it compared to the Irish Republic. So it would be I think that would be useful. In your opening remarks, Linda, you talked about yesterday's debacle around welfare reform. I'm afraid, that I think has caused, I spoke to a number of business people yesterday, caused considerable concern in the private sector. I mean, how does it look to you guys, with the cool face, what's happening yesterday? And we'll play it over the next few days.
Well, our main concern is it's going to derail the corporation tax, because it seems to be all on track, and we're all getting geared up to it actually happening, and all the main parties seem to be supportive of implementing it once we were given the powers. So it is a bit of a blow. We actually wondered whether it should bother coming today. Is there still going to be an interest in it? So it is disappointing to hear that, because, as I said, one of the items in the jobs plan was the stability of our political environment, and if that's up in the air again, then it's another difficulty for us when we're trying to present Northern Ireland as a place to come and do business and to grow your business.
Investors in business like stability. We like stability in legislation. We like to know where things are going with a degree of certainty.
Yes, in fact, that was the point I had written down here. Foreign direct investment, stability, and political stability is obviously part of that. And we haven't travelled down that far in the course of time from a bad place to where we are now in terms of that stability. And of course, there are people out there who would want to destroy that stability as well. But when you're going out into the world to sell products or services, and you're members, for Northern Ireland PLC, how damaging is this going to be? Because the point about stability is absolutely right. Because for example, it looks as if the visit to the Washington next week by the two senior ministers in this administration isn't going to happen at this stage. And how could it, when you think of it? Because the stability that you talk about, which is so vitally important, just isn't there at the moment. So how damaging is that to Northern Ireland PLC and for the private sector in particular when you go out internationally?
Well, 40 years or so on, people have gone about their business and managed to keep on going. It's just that it seemed that we had an opportunity to take our future into our own hands and a step forward. And it's just a feeling of disappointment. But I imagine that people will still go on trying to. It might make investment in Ireland's job a bit more difficult.
I spent a big part of my life out around the world selling Northern Ireland Company through the Troubles, right? So it is an obstacle and something you have to deal with, but by and large you find a way of dealing with it. And the First and Deputy First Minister are experts at when they go abroad to put a good front on it, so I think it's the damage. There's two ways. One is once people start to get in a little bit of detail, okay, they get past the first thing and they start talking to their advisors and their legal. And one of the things that anybody considering an investment in a new location look at is the political risk. It's the first thing you look at, political risk. And it'll come up as it's a political risk. Will the legislation stay the same? Is there consistency? All those things. And that'll cause definitely a problem. I think the second problem is that we're just, the last year, almost a year, I just get the feeling, dealing with businesses, that there's a feeling we're coming out of recession. And I think people are looking up and feeling more positive. And actually, if people feel positive, you know, the economy does recover, it is all about morale. And from the announcement, the Government House Agreement and the whole Agreement on Corporation Tax, there's been a real buzz about, right, we're real, we're serious, we just have to get a date and a rate agreed, and now we can go out and sell ourselves. And I think it's just like let the air out of the balloon. What's happening?
And
what's the point, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's where the big damage will happen to.
Yeah, and the point is that for Invest Northern Ireland, which is the organisation charged to go out to attract that foreign and direct investment, I think it's a very difficult set of circumstances, because if welfare reform isn't resolved, corporation tax, the probability of it happening and being realised is probably nil. I mean, what effect will that have?
Well, I suppose it's hard to be crystal ball, because what might be the situation now might, touch wood, change in the next week or so. We don't know about that.
But we can only deal with the circumstances, Chair, with respect that we're dealing with now.
Well, our inquiry is about post-2017, touch wood, whenever it happens. If I could just intervene, William, on that point, please. And Mr. McCall, you're a person of considerable experience in these matters. In terms of positive selling points for the North here, and we'll take it in the context, we can take it in the context of now or the context of the potential. If you were going out abroad, US, wherever, mainland Europe, wherever, what are the positives that you have, and you've been there through, you've said, through the real difficult times, whenever bombs were exploding on our streets and people were being murdered. Take us a stage further and say the positives that are currently there, and then the positives that potentially will be there.
Okay, the positives that are there now are the fact that we have a good education system, we have a good, well-educated workforce, we have the skill base. We all know our problems, but I mean, you're asking me what the story you tell is, right, which by and large is true. We have a real good work ethic and people that really want to get the job done and have a will-do, can-do attitude, right? Those are all the things you talk about. You talk about the fact that you're part of Britain, and therefore, when people talk about British standards and things like that, you talk about, you know, we work to British standards, ISO, and people understand British standards easily. You also talk about the fact that you're Irish, and everybody loves the Irish, right? So you've actually quite a good... going forward, what we'd have is, that'll make the difference, is we would have lower corporation tax. That's an important one. I'd love to be able to stay in better than that. We have a department in our government that's dedicated and covers everything you ever need to know or support you need. If you come and invest here, you have one place to go, and whatever your issues are, they'll point in the right direction, they'll find solutions. Now, Invest do that a lot for indigenous companies when they're doing things, but we need some sort of body like that that's going to help people come on.
Right.
So,
okay.
And I think that would be the two big pluses you'd want, corporation tax. I'm sort of taking political stability as a given here, you know, because we want to be able to talk about political stability. Matter about some of the cracks might be there or something.
Yes.
And I think we do have a population that has an appetite for change and growth, and a willingness to be flexible, to have young people who can be quickly translated in from one type of business into another. The good skills work that's been done with the higher apprenticeships is a good step forward, because we can say we can deliver people, we can train them up quickly. I think that's been, we've always said our major asset is our people, and I think that's been recognised, and the investment that's put into FE and AHE is very important. But also that we have young people coming through schools with a clear understanding of what the career opportunities are, and I think there's been good steps being made in those areas.
The other important thing looking forward is the speed with which we can implement on the ground when you're talking about investment.
Yes.
Is it going to be held up in planning? Is it going to be held up because the infrastructure isn't there? And if that's the case, just...
I think we'll be coming on to that. I know Gordon wants to explore the infrastructure and stuff later on. Sorry, William, you wanted to follow through on some of the points you're making.
I just, Chair, and I accept the point you're making, but I'm just, you know, if we are in a circumstance, we have to, I mean, you made the point, Linda, you wondered whether it was worth your while coming today. You know, the truth of the matter is, I'm just, you know, from a Northern Ireland PLC, I mean, obviously, from the point of view of the corporation tax, as a party, we want to see it happening, because we think it would be hugely beneficial for Northern Ireland, given the right deal around the block grant and all that. But I suppose the final question I want to ask is, you know, what is the opportunity cost or the impact if corporation tax doesn't happen to business in terms of international markets?
Well, I think the business, it'll mean it's as you were, so we'll still carry on doing our best, but our best...
With a hand behind your back?
Yeah, but our best hasn't been good enough. I think that's the point. You know, our economy's not growing, the private sector's not growing, we're not creating enough jobs, so we'll just go on as we have been, doing our best, but it's not good enough. That's the thing. And so there, in 20 or 30 years, we'll still be worrying about the most vulnerable in society because we haven't actually done anything to change things. Right? If we don't do something to change it, we still have these vulnerable people and we'll still be arguing about whether they get looked after well or not. The way to get the most vulnerable to look after them is create enough jobs that anybody who has a job can have a job. That's the best way to get people out.
We're moving from a situation where we're dependent on state aid, where the European funding has changed and largely gone, to a situation where people have an incentive to create more wealth through the lower corporation tax. And they won't just buy a new car with it, they will invest it in their business. You know, every morning you hear on the Good Morning Ulster the stories about another company has invested money and that more jobs have been grown. People want their businesses to grow, they want to provide employment for people, and they want Northern Ireland to succeed. And corporation tax is one of those incentives. It would give us something a little bit extra that they won't find in other parts of GB. And obviously we've got them in the south of Ireland, which gives us that opportunity to compete with just something different.
That's grand, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Mr Dunn, Gordon.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Apologies for nipping out there. You talk about investment in infrastructure, and I think we're all very supportive of that. There is mention of a well-developed infrastructure reduces the effective distance between regions. Can you elaborate on that, please? What you're getting at?
Well, I suppose in rural economy, our economy, we have a lot of rural areas, if you like. They appear rural because of perhaps the infrastructure in terms of the roads to them, but also in terms of where we have greatest strength in our electricity grid.
So I think it's like roads, electricity grid, but it's also broadband and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you know, broadband is the ability to bring in somewhere in rural right to you, right there. Better road reduces your travel distance from 1 hour to 40 minutes, makes a huge difference. All these things make it, you know, we're small enough that should be one really, but infrastructure is the thing that makes a difference of central Belfast or...
There's still a lot of potential to be had from the sort of the broadband and the connections, the speed that we've got, the infrastructure we've already got, and exploiting that.
And I always think we're very, very good, but then I don't go that far from Belfast. And it's when I talk to people who are outside Belfast, say, actually, I can't get this now. Right? So we're better than most other cities, actually. You know,
yeah. Interestingly, we had manufacturing NA in there recently. They were saying 70% of manufacturing jobs are outside of Belfast, which is quite interesting. We don't seem to think that way. So there are a lot of small businesses doing well, you know, in the rural settings and have those issues that we're very much aware of, broadband and the need for superfast broadband and just accessibility. Transport links obviously are critical, and the more investment that obviously is put into roads and improvements, sewage systems, water, you know, all of those things I suppose are all issues of concern to business.
I think a lot of companies have really adapted the new technologies. Down in Enniskillen with a company that's selling plastic bottle labels, and they can personalise those Coke bottles with your name on.
Yes.
They're providing those from Enniskillen to everywhere. And it can all be done very quickly because of the technology. It's sometimes the transport getting them out. You need to make sure we've got the connections.
The other important thing that we're inferring, if you like, in the issue of regionality or being in rural. You know, when, let's be positive, when we get the corporation tax, yeah, we're going to have a deluge of inquiries potentially. We need to be very clear what our priorities are in terms of the type of business that we want to attract and give our finite resources to. Yeah? And we need to be also clear as to where we want them as well. I'm not saying you can overly influence businesses, but the likes of businesses that are reliant on broadband can be anywhere where you've good broadband without a cost impact to that business being too.
Yeah, so it was the issue of broadband is.
And so it is broadband, but it's also, perhaps we're at the stage, if we want corporation tax and the speed of delivery on the ground of jobs, we're at the stage of having to choose where those hubs should be. That's a bigger policy, political issue, obviously. But we're going to have to invest in infrastructure ahead of time, perhaps, invest in nice business parks or whatever. But we need to be clear the other types of infrastructure that we're talking about. What type of industry are we trying to attract?
Are you hinting at that you vote for, well, maybe you're putting more hinting on it. Like, for example, in the South, the specialisms and the key areas of businesses that they have targeted?
Well, getting Apple to go to Athenry is a huge win on a data centre. There's no need for a data centre to be in the centre of Belfast if that's what we're attracting. Yes. It can be anywhere if we had sufficient infrastructure of the right type.
Yes.
But we need to be clever in what we're targeting. We need to be clever in how we prioritise this attractive corporation tax rate and target our resources in terms of the manpower to deliver at the right place, the right places.
Very obviously strategic. Sorry, Gordon.
That's okay, yeah. No, I think you've given some good, raised some good points there, which will benefit to us, and thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Right, just picking up on that then, have you done, because so much of work, depending on the nature of your business, is done via smartphone technology, have you done any work with Ofcom around the issue of tackling the rollout project through Arqiva? No? No, you haven't, on the not spots thing. Because that means so much to salespeople and the ability to pick up on calls, all that sort of communications with companies and stuff too. Very, very important.
Yeah, I would meant to cover that with broadband. I think
yes.
Mobile technology and coverage is so important too. And 3G coverage now,
yes. 4G.
And 4G is just getting so important everywhere.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. We had scheduled someone else to speak here, but it's an issue that actually came up yesterday. And again, it's probably feeding into you from more or less the same quarter. I attended an event here yesterday, hosted an event yesterday from the Federation of Master Builders. And a big issue which came up was the whole question about the impact of procurement regulation on small businesses, particularly on smaller businesses, SMEs. So you've raised it as a concern. You've also raised the issue of inconsistencies between public sector procurement practice here and in other parts of GB and indeed the rest of Ireland. Could you just tease that through with me, if you could give, for the purposes of the record, some examples of how you see that as being problematic?
Our view is that there is an extreme lack of competition in public procurement here. Everything is now within the Central Procurement Directorate. And it's grown like topsy, brought everything in. And I know the understanding behind it is centralising and there should be efficiencies of scale and so on. But for a lot of contracts, what we seem to be seeing is that there's a lack of knowledge of individual specialist information for contracts. What we get is the tick box mentality. Well, you know, one size fits all, and it doesn't fit all, and there's no doubt about it. In other areas, you will get private sector people who are specialists in, you know, devising procurement contracts, and overseeing them, monitoring, making sure that they happen, that they are delivered as the contractor says they're going to deliver it, rather than the situation where you get a standard contract goes out, things get added in, costs increase, and there's no one really taking control of it and saying, look, this is what you said you were going to deliver, you deliver that. That monitoring role isn't happening. Whereas if you had a private sector person in charge of the contract, they will make sure that it happens as per the contract. That's what we seem to be seeing in other areas. Things work quicker. There's more knowledge from the private sector company because they're working to the brief given to them by the commissioning body or organisation. There's also more scope for innovation. I know there's some work being done with CPD in terms of creating more innovation, but in our view that could be considerably increased. So we're not getting even necessarily good value for money for the public purse.
Well, just on that point, and I'm glad you raised it because you're taking me the direction of an issue which has come up numerous occasions. At what point does good value for money become sub-economic tendering? And that issue and the ability, because to my mind, and this is based on experience in dealing with cases, the sub-economic tendering issue has an impact on our local economy because many of us sat in a room with subbies and contractors. There's only two outcomes ultimately to that. Either the firm, which is sub-economically tendering, is sucking off another profitable part of its business to sustain that, and that usually goes wallop hit the wall, or a whole crowd of suppliers and subbies are basically shafted financially as well. So, yes, and that's where I see the point of the procurement delivering efficiently and on time, but making sure that no one is financially disadvantaged as a consequence of out-and-out just wrong pricing. Now,
that's where, you know, if you have a private sector person who's a specialist, they know what's the right price, sort of a price band.
It kind of says to me that what you're saying is that there's a lack of knowledge in the public sector around these issues to be able to deal with them. Now, that's one element, but in terms of actually controlling that and making sure that the prices which are coming in are sustainable prices, the regulation of that, would you welcome increased regulation of that and control of that?
It would depend on what system we're actually operating. We would like to see CPD actually brought down to more of the kinds of services and products that are a bit more generic. So, you know, there's no problem in CPD doing a stationary contract. That's going to be, doesn't matter. But if it's a new building for a hospital, you would like people with an expertise in that to be handling that contract and understanding what value for money will look like, what the right level of pricing will be. We're not in favour of greater regulation, I have to say. So.
Well, I'm trying to get. How do you feel that? Because again, you want to have efficient economy, no matter corporation tax or whatever there. How do you deal with that issue to make sure that you don't wind up in situations where people have been basically walked all over, trod all over, and just cast aside financially, and indeed where a project itself could be stymied or have to be re-tendered or whatever because of, and God knows we've seen enough of that at Desert Crate, you're probably well aware of that fiasco. How do you ensure that that experience, in terms of realistic pricing, and you're the people that know about these things, is actually enshrined in practice?
I think that we've always argued for the right balance between private and public sector knowledge being brought to the table for given contracts. And like Linda has alluded to, it depends on the nature of the contract, what that mix should be. And that flexibility doesn't seem to be there at the moment within the CPD baron. We've had examples recently where a specification in the rest of GB, which complies with European law,
Yes,
isn't deemed adequate
yes.
in Northern Ireland. How can that be in
It's
terms
down
of
to-
adequacy of your meeting European requirements?
So what you're
We were
saying
talking
is,
about the other day.
some of these European-initiated laws are interpreted differently here as they would be in GB,
Absolutely.
right? Okay. It would be helpful if you could give us a few examples of that. I don't mean that now, but if you could provide us with a few examples of that. But to get back to my original question then, how do you ensure that fair pricing is enshrined in practice, if not by regulation then, on the procurement stuff?
One of the big fears here is that if it's always lowest, it always seems to be lowest cost.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
the
there's lowest-
preponderance to that, the ability of whoever's making decisions through the tender analysis process to be able to say it is quality and it is cost below that base cost, we can't accept
But
it.
you'll know quality and cost are included in both that. It's the
They are.
weighting that you give to them.
It's the weighting and the difficulty getting beyond the weighting of 30/70.
Yes. Okay. All right, fair point. Take that. Okay, thanks very much indeed. You've given us a lot of food for thought and a lot of very valuable information. And then the other stuff, Linda, the European stuff, you'll be able to
Yep.
provide us with some stuff around
Will
that
do.
too. Okay, thanks very much indeed. That's been very helpful. And I hope we have productive success, including corporation tax enabling powers being delivered as well. So,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
That's grand. So that concludes our session for today.
Well
Okay,
done,
thanks
Chair.
very much, everybody.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern